Welcome back to another chess game analysis video. So today I want to show you a game that I played online in a blitz game. It features the wing gambit in the Sicilian defense after e4, c5, b4, and it's a very strong weapon against especially lower rated, medium rated players in blitz. In classical, maybe you should study a little bit of theory, but I think it's an interesting opening choice especially if you want to get around a lot of Sicilian opening debate. Basically, it's quite straightforward. I just show you this game. C takes b5, d4. Now you have the center, so you gambit one pawn. It's why it's called wing gambit, and you normally don't get the pawn back in the opening, so it's a real gambit. e6, a3. Now you gambit the pawn for further development. He doesn't take the pawn now, knight c6, he wants to recapture the bishop if I ever take, but you don't take, you just develop naturally. Knight f3, then d5 striking the center. Now you can either take or you can push. In this game I pushed e5. In this variation it's probably best to gain space advantage in the center and just leave the pawns in the center. B takes a3, now he takes the pawn. And now, very calm and collected, this opening. It's not a rush. You gambit two pawns, you will get back one pawn, especially normally this a pawn you will get back, and then you have a comfortable game and some compensation for this pawn. a6 he plays, bishop d3, development, not taking the pawn, knight h6. So the problem with this opening basically is that black can't really develop his bishop naturally, even here. And he can't develop his knight naturally, so basically he has to kind of weirdly play like this or something like that. If he goes with the knight to e7, then he can't develop the bishop, so maybe he has to do some maneuvers like this, bishop out castles. So if you ever want to castle, he has a little bit of an issue there. So he develops his knight to the rim of the board, which is okay. And now you could technically, this is one variation, you could just take the knight, bishop takes h6, g takes h6, knight takes a3, and you get the pawn back this way. So what I played is a little bit worse, I think, but also playable. Knight takes a3 immediately, not exchanging this bishop for the knight and not destroying the pawn structure. You can sometimes do this later on. Here he doesn't let me. Knight f5 immediately brings the knight back into the center, which is a good move. Now you see after queen c7, now double attacking the knight, but it's not really attack because the bishop indirectly defends the knight. So h6 and castles, we have compensation for white. The engine favors black slightly, but I think it's very hard to play. This bishop behind the pawn chain, the bishop can't really develop naturally, and all in all, maybe this knight comes in here at some point, which I play I play now already knight b5, which is a mistake. In this position, interesting enough, white actually is a little bit better after g4. Seems like a little bit of a strange move, but basically the knight now has to go to the rim of the board, knight h4, but now you exchange the knight, and now knight b5. The problem basically for black is that bishop is now here and not here, so this square is weakened, and the bishop has to retreat, wasting a lot of moves with the bishop. Bishop a3 now trying to exchange the bishop, and after bishop takes, rook takes, castles, knight d6. You have a pawn less, but with this very, very strong knight on d6, it's very hard to play. The engine says it's equal, but I think I would definitely favor white in this position. This would have been one variation. g4, very nice here. But I play knight b5 immediately, trying to get in here. But with the bishop and the queen guarding this square, it's still hard. By the way, this is a typical maneuver in these kinds of openings. You develop the knight like this, and the pawn can't really capture because the rook is hanging as long as this bishop is not developed yet. So to solve this problem, he develops his bishop now. Bishop takes bishop d7, and now first before moving the knight, bishop takes f5, e takes f5, and now after this knight has been eliminated, the knight was also guarding the d6 square. Now you can go in there. Knight d6 check. And he basically has to give up the bishop. Now bishop takes d6, he takes d6, and you're down a pawn, and this pawn, it's not so clear if it's a weakness or a strength. I thought it was quite okay there in the black camp, and then I tried, this is why I chose this variation. He castles, rook e1, you see it's a very sharp, sometimes very forced variation. The pawn structure is an absolute mess here. also in the center with these pawns. Black has a magnet pawn here on the board, which he has more, and this is why black is a little bit better here in this position, but it's very sharp variation, and you need to be very precise. So bishop e6, now trying to block the e file from my rook, which is alright. Bishop a3, now supporting the pawn, behind is also the rook, you need to be a little bit careful. Knight a5, now he tries to activate his knight, which is certainly alright. Knight e5, I don't let him in there, he still goes in there, knight c4. Knight takes and bishop takes, and the pawn structure, you could argue was fixed a little bit, because he has 3 pawns here, but also my pawn structure isn't that bad either, because now I have basically 2 passed pawns there on the same file, but I can now basically lose this d6 pawn, and it's not going to be that bad compared to the pawn structure before. So I play queen d2, I try to activate the queen, and now he plays, I think, probably one of the decisive mistakes in the game. He plays b5, he wants to hold this chain in like that, but I think it's not that great of a move, because now I can activate the bishop c5, now in front of the pawn chain here, and everything is defended, and basically this pawn is now forever defended by the bishop. He has only got a light square bishop, so it's opposite color bishops, which tend to be very drawish, so my disadvantage from having a pawn less is already compensated by having opposite color bishops, and this very strong bishop here, which looks into all directions. I think it's a strong piece. Defense, and is also supported here. Can't get kicked away at some... Maybe you need to sacrifice the exchange to get rid of it, but you know what I mean. So he plays bishop d5, also centralizing the bishop, which isn't that great, because now my rook comes in here, attacks the bishop. Bishop e6, he has to go back. Queen e3, which is a mistake. Now immediately d5 would have been possible. The rook is here, and the queen is here defending the pawn. The bishop would need to move back, and then rook e7 going in there. 2 pawns here, very strong, defended by the bishop. The rook comes on the e file. This rook is very hard to get rid of, even if you trade it off at some point. And the pawn is gonna take, and this is just a very hard position to play, because black is basically paralyzed. And this is what happens sometimes in the Gambit. You see, the position is quite difficult to play. You up a pawn, but the pawn here isn't really that useful. So basically, queen e3 I played. This is basically tries to slow play it a little bit too much with like everything on the e file, trying to control everything. But he plays bishop d7, which now allows my rook to come in here, and rook e8 trying to exchange the rook, but queen f3. Now there are some tricks, obviously. If the rook ever takes, the pawn takes, then the rook comes here. The rook is also attacked here in the corner. This pawn is constantly attacked, so black is already a little bit, not in Zugzwang, but is very close to. He doesn't really have great moves here. He tried a5, just pushing the pawn, which is probably one of the better attempts. But now queen b7. Now queen comes in here. There's a double attack on this bishop here, and if the bishop ever moves, then the engine wants to play rook takes, by the way. But after rook takes, then d takes, queen e8, and then maybe the rook comes in here. Or queen c7 would be an option. There are multiple ways to actually win this paralyzed position. Maybe it's not winning, but it's very hard to play for you. With this pawn here, no piece that can get rid of it. So he played bishop e6 instead, but now just d5, and now he already has a problem. Bishop takes d5, and rook takes, e8 check, exchanging the rook first, queen takes. Interesting enough, if you take the bishop here, this is still better for white according to the engine, but very hard position. You can take the rook here, and the pawn is pinned, and there is some line. You can take the rook here, then for instance queen takes and the pawn takes, and somehow this should be better for white, but the pawn is just too strong. Maybe the rook can come in here, and then this is winning. But I thought this was very hard to actually play, so this is why I chose here in this position not to take the bishop, but I just chose to take the rook first, simplify further. Queen takes the rook, queen takes d5, and now probably the best attempt would have been queen e4, trying to exchange the queens and play with 2 pawns for a bishop, which I'm not so sure if it's promising. The engine says it's winning for white, but I think this would have been probably a good attempt. You could try maybe for yourself, evaluate this position if you think you would win this. Black also has 3 pawns here, which are kind of, you need to be a little bit careful there. But in basically this very hard position already, he played rook a7, and now you see it's a blitz game, but I still wanted to show it to you, even though this is probably now just a time trouble mistake, because that just blunders an entire rook on the spot. b4, and the game is basically over here, but it was already very hard, and I wanted to focus for this video. I wanted to focus on the opening anyway. So b4, cb4, c3, d7, queen d8 blocking the pawn, and now a very nice finishing for the game. Bishop b6, attacking the queen, forcing the queen away. Bishop, queen can take bishop, but new queen, queen takes queen, old queen takes queen, king h7, b takes a5, c2, and now in this position he resigned the game, and white is winning here. So even though this was a little bit abrupt ending, I still think this is very hard position actually to play for white. And I wanted to show you this opening with b4, and then just going for this very nice setup with the pawns, which I think is very interesting, controlling all the dark squares, making it hard for black to actually develop, and at some point, if black actually develops the knight, there's always this motive here to take, there's this motive to trade off the bishop on this diagonal, if black lets it, or you can just take with the knight, come in here, try to come in here, or fork here. There are multiple options on how you can pursue your victory here, basically. So as said, you need to study maybe a little bit of an opening theory, but I just wanted to give you one example, a brief overlook over the wing gambit, how this can play out. And I hope you liked the introduction. If you would like to see more games of the wing gambit, maybe I find some high-level games as well. Maybe not top Grandmaster games, but maybe medium or high-rated gameplays. Write into the comments what you want to see on the channel, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.